Spanish 1, Test 11, Test Chapter 11. Section 1 is conjugate the following stem-changing and irregular verbs in the preterite tense based on the subject pronoun given. So those verbs are going to be from your textbook. They are on page 234, 243, and 250 and 51. So it covers all of those stem changers that are on page 234 and 235. There's like a box of them right here, this box right here, and then on the next page there's like 4 of them right here that are in that first paragraph. Servir, repetir, preferir, and morir. So those are the stem changing preterites, and then the irregular preterites were on page 243, which is the ser and traer, and then the rest of them, I believe, are on page 250 and 51. It's like hacer, estar, querer, venir, saber, etc. So part 1 is going to be 1 through 20. Okay. Part 1 through 20, and it's same old verb conjugation. So it's blank, subject, pronoun, verb, and you have to conjugate it in the preterite tense. Please be sure that you're reading the directions on all of the test materials at this point. I mean, you should have been doing it all along, but when we start changing verb tenses, that's when it gets really confusing because some students don't read the directions and they're like, oh, I know how to conjugate these in the present tense. And then I usually have somebody try to conjugate everything in the present tense. So please be reading the directions and make sure that you are doing the preterite tense. If I were you, I'd either bring a piece of scratch paper, or somewhere on your test, I would just immediately write down, like I would just get on my test and I would say, tener, to, estar, estuve, on and on with all of those irregulars, and then even the stem changers, and like say, okay, these are E to I and this is O to U, because I'm a big proponent of just brain dumping, and then the information that you need is already on your paper instead of trying to like juggle all the information at once in your head. So that's the first section, is 1 through 20. 2 is 21 to 28. And this is going to be the difference between por and para, all right? So it says decide if the sentence would need por or para and write it in the blank. So these sentences are going to be in English, and the word is going to be underlined that you need to know what it means. And so you're going to just write if it should be por or if it should be para. So you need to look at the whole context of the sentence and figure out what the sentence is asking, and then you can decide. So this is not an exhaustive list, but remember that para is used for if something is intended for a person, a time, a place, if you're heading to a direction, you're traveling for Mexico, like traveling to Mexico. Por is a little bit more open-ended. It's like if you travel by train, if you travel by way of Interstate 35 to get to school, if you if the book is by Mark Twain, if you study for 10 hours, if you exchange your Dr. Pepper for a Coca-Cola, okay? So that kind of thing. So those are going to be the examples of your sentence. Like it's going to look something like blank, and then it's going to say, I need to study for my oral exam. That's not hinting at anything at all. Okay? So I'll have 4 underlined, and you have to pick por or para. So in this case, you need to study for an objective, so an intention, a thing that you're doing. So that has to be para. Okay? And then you may have a sentence that says, I need to study for 4 hours. For 4 hours. And this, since this is a duration, a period of time that's extended, how long you did something or will do something, this has to be 4. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. Part 3 and 4 are vocabulary. Same as always. 3 is 29 to 33. That doesn't make sense. Yeah, it does. And then 4 is 34 to 38. Okay. This one is Spanish to English, and this one is English to Spanish. Okay. A couple of things about your vocabulary. I have given you a list of your vocabulary. Okay, I spent time, I looked in your book, I typed it out, I picked the definitions that apply to the textbook or that like section of like the topic. Okay. The problem is that some students somehow are putting definitions that are not given in your textbook. Like some words in Spanish mean a few different things or like a different variation. So I'm always really confused and a little bit concerned when on somebody's test on the vocabulary, I find that they're putting a definition for something that there's no way that they should know. It's not the definition from the textbook. It's not the definition that I've given you with your vocabulary lists, okay? And for the most part, I've given you guys the benefit of the doubt, but I've started counting off if you don't use the definition that I've given you for the text. Because each vocabulary is organized in such a way that it's about topics. And so there's a specific form of the word that they want you to know. Okay, so I always get a little bit concerned as to why students are using vocabulary that they should not know. Because I haven't asked you to go outside and use a dictionary to figure out what the words mean. I have given them to you. So I just want to let you know that I'm concerned when you guys just maybe about how you're getting answers on your test. Okay, so just be aware of that, and please have integrity. Use the definitions that I have given you on your vocabulary list. Okay, that's the list that you should be studying from in preparation for the test. You should not be going out and getting the dictionaries. You absolutely should not be using it on a test. Okay, so please stick with the vocabulary that I have written out and given to you in your notebook. With that said, continually, if there's a verb, an AR verb, ER verb, IR verb, you have to write to verb. Okay. The very definition of an infinitive, if a verb ends in AR, ER, or IR, you have to write to verb. Same thing with if a word has el or la, los, las, una, unos, unos, unas in front of it, you have to write the definition of the definite or indefinite article, which is either a, an, or the, depending on what the word is. El, la, los, las is the. Un, una, unos, unas is a or an, depending on what the noun is. Okay? So you have to be translating that. It says translate the following words or phrases. So I consider el blank to be a whole phrase. So you have to translate the whole phrase. That's why you're getting points off if you are not including the or a or an in your, or to in your answer. Okay? Now, the last section is 5. part 5. Okay? And this is just translations. It's 39 to 35. Okay? 39 to, no, sorry, not 30. That's dumb. 35. 45. Right? So there's 45 questions. These are going to be dealing with cuál, cuáles. They're going to be dealing with por and para. They're going to be dealing with irregular and stem changing preterite. And I believe that's it. Okay, so really that's it. Remember that cuál or cuáles means what or which, and you use that in a sentence when you say cuál es tu clase favorita. When you want to say what and then is, when you have ser after it, you use cuál or cuáles instead of que. You could say, oh, it doesn't matter. So if you have something like what is your favorite class, then you use cuál or cuáles. If you had what are your favorite foods, you'd say cuáles. So cuál is for when something is singular. Cuáles is when something is plural. This would be cuál es. This would be cuáles son, because singular interrogative has to have a singular verb. Plural interrogative has to have a plural verb. Okay. Por and para we've already talked about. And then irregular and stem changing preterite. So the verbs that you need to know how to conjugate for section 1, you also need to know what the definitions are. And most of them you should already know or at least be familiar with. And so you should know that. Now, let's do an example. Okay. If we said cuál es, or what are your favorite fruits, you would say cuáles son, and then you can say, let's say this is informal. Tus frutas favoritas. Okay. Favorite is an adjective. It describes fruit in this case. Okay. So favorite, it's favorito, is that actual adjective, is the masculine singular form. So you have to be able to change favorite to match the noun that it's describing. It's modifying, okay? So because this is feminine and plural, favorites or favorito has to be changed to favoritas to be feminine and plural. The other thing is, I think on your homework I saw this. You guys were putting favoritas frutas, okay? Because in English we normally put the adjective before the noun. But remember that in Spanish, you have to put the noun before the adjective. The adjective goes after the noun, okay? So I will be marking off for that if you forget that, okay? Because that's an important thing. In Spanish, the descriptive adjective, an adjective that describes what kind, how many, which one of the noun has to go after, okay? So don't forget that. You may have something like did y'all have to read? Now remember, we do not translate did in this case, but it does indicate that it is in the past tense, okay? Have to. Have to is an expression, right? It is a tener expression. It is tener que. Remember that tener by itself means to have, like possession, like I have this marker. To have to is an obligation. something that you do, all right? So it's going to be in the past tense. We're going to use tener. Okay. All right. And tener is one of the irregular verbs. So it would be, upside question mark, it would be tuvieron que. Because this right here is ustedes. Y'all. Y'all is ustedes. And how we conjugate tener in the preterite tense for ustedes is tuvieron. Okay. Entonces tuvieron que leer. To read is leer, right? And your expression is tener que infinitive. So did y'all have to read? So that's it for that sentence. I did want to point something out real quick. We've talked about por and para. So once again, you need to know the difference between por and para, when to use those, because you have to look at the sentence and then you have to be able to translate it. So decide which one is necessary and then translate it. But there is a verb that actually includes for in its definition. So this is one of your stem changing verbs, pedir. This means to ask for. Okay. So if I had something like I asked for bread, you would not say yo pedí para el pan. Okay? Because pedir actually means to ask for. It already includes the for in the definition. So if you had a sentence like this, all you would say is yo pedí el pan. Okay, and that's it. That's all you do, because asked for is part of the definition, so you don't need por or para. All right. Okay. So let's talk about some of the key words. Let's see. Book, class, car, bed, morning, favorite, food, to cook, soda, and restaurant. Okay. A little note on restaurant. This is a little bit hard sometimes because it looks, the Spanish word for restaurant is restaurante. So all it is restaurant with an E on the end. And some of you forget to put the E on the end. And so I consider that the English word, like you have not actually translated it. So you need to know that if you, well, you will need restaurant on the test. So you can't just leave it restaurant. You have to say restaurante with an E on the end as the Spanish word. If you leave it like this, I'm going to consider that you did not translate it, and so therefore it's wrong. Hey, you want to say hi? Come here. Come here, you little skimpy scamp. Come here. Say hi. Sit. Sit. Please, thank you. He's hiding. What? Hi, Sophie. Anyway, he's not really interested. And then, as always, you have 3 extra credit questions. Oh, sorry. 3 extra credit questions, and I believe that they are all on. Like, there really wasn't a very good culture section. Yes, I know. So, sorry. I think it's all in Peru. It's all the, here we go, page. Any day now. Yeah, it's all on this page. All of your things are on this page because there really wasn't anything else that was good for cultural stuff. So, as always, if you have questions, let me know. And I'm rooting for you. Also, some of you are taking advantage of this. But verses, don't forget that verses are extra credit. They either cancel out a wrong answer, or if you get 100, then they count for 1 extra credit point. So since there's 45 questions, each question is over 2 points apiece. So if you missed like 2 questions, but then you wrote down 2 verses, then you'd still get 100. Or it would only be, so each verse would be worth like over 2 points. Okay, so that's a big deal. So there you go. You can always bring scratch paper to a test, like if you don't have room for writing verses or notes to yourself, and then you just turn in that scratch paper with your thing. Also, on the final verses are extra credit too. So your next test after 11 is 12, which obviously, but that's the final. And so if you want to memorize verses for your final, you can do that too. So, all right, go get them. Here's an amendment to the extra credit questions. I just realized that your extra credit questions for test 11 come from page 231, which is indeed this. But there's also a question from page 237, which is this. The la comida de los países hispanos. So I just want to let you know that.